The Phantom is Tecno's most technologically advanced lineup of smartphones, and the Phantom X I have here is probably their best execution of a Tecno flagship smartphone to date. It has an uncompromising look and feel to it, even though some compromises were made to make it what I would call a flagship killer. The front is dominated by a 6.7-inch Full HD OLED display with a 90Hz refresh rate, some extreme curves to the sides, and a pill-shaped cutout for the dual selfie cameras, one regular one and one wide angle. The earpiece is a tiny slot between the edge of the display and the metal frame, and in that tiny bezel are the usual sensors as well as a selfie flash. Your volume and power buttons are on the right edge but slightly pushed towards the back to accommodate the curved display, and I very much love how the back glass and metal frame neatly diverge from their original line to give equal margins of frame above and below the row of buttons. The top edge houses the secondary microphone, the triple slot tray which holds 2 SIM cards and an SD card. It also has a rubber ring for improved water resistance, even though it does not have an official water resistance certification. Towards the bottom edge is the headphone jack, which is thoroughly extinct on a number of flagships, the microphone, a USB-C port which supports 33-watt fast charging, faster than what Samsung can do with their flagships, and an array of holes for the loudspeaker. Moving over to the back, the Phantom X has one of the biggest camera bumps I've ever seen on a smartphone. It is as thick as 4 credit cards stacked on top of each other, and it's a 2-tier bump as well, with the first one housing the signature quad LED flash and the laser autofocus, and the second one housing the 3 camera lenses. Such an extravagant camera setup should mean an extravagant camera experience too, which we will find out in the camera section of this review, but right now, just looking at the sheer size of the main sensor tells me that we are in for one solid camera experience. The setup is a massive 1/1.3-inch 50-megapixel ultra-sensing sensor, a 13-megapixel 2x telephoto camera, and an 8-megapixel ultra-wide. The Tecno branding is laid underneath the glass horizontally, and the glass itself feels very nice in the hand. It's a frosted glass finish with really subtle grooves running the length of the back. I noticed when I handled it, the camera bump would be a natural resting place for my index finger. The Phantom X is running Android 11 with iOS 7.6 on top, and I found 6 software features that looked pretty interesting. It has a picture-in-picture mode, so if I want to continue listening to my YouTube video whilst I write down some notes, I just swipe up with 3 fingers in the YouTube app and it becomes a floating window. Then I can open my notes app and get to that jotting. If I want to interact with the YouTube app whilst it's in floating window mode to maybe select another video, I can tap it once, search for the clip I want to watch, then tap these pinch-in buttons to make it smaller and resume with my notes. When I feel like closing the YouTube app, I can just swipe left or right and it's gone. There is also peek-proof mode, which allows you to dim or completely black out part of the display so that snoopy passengers or spouses can't see the full picture. You can use these buttons to adjust the blinders to exactly what you want to show or hide by moving them up or down, and left or right to adjust how transparent or opaque the blinds will be. Drop a like on this video if you like or hate this feature. The fingerprint is now in the display, and it is very snappy, but more crucially very reliable. It was able to recognize my fingerprint 100% of the time. I was not too confident with it because of how slow it was during the setup phase, but it performs really well when it matters. There are also 3 different unlock animations available in case you want to spice up the unlocking experience, but unfortunately there is no way of switching animations off or downloading more, something that can be solved with a software update. There is edge lighting as well, which animates the curved edges of the display for stuff like app notifications and calls. For each you have an option of 3 different animations to choose from, and also the option of disabling them altogether if you prefer not having them. Video Assistant mode is another interesting feature. It only activates when you're in any of the pre-listed video apps, and you can add more if they are not on the list. So let's say you're in YouTube, you swipe and hold from the left or the right edge of the screen, and you get a toolkit for some quick action and quick controls, like a do not disturb mode for just calls or just SMSs or just notifications. Play in the background is super awesome for YouTube because it allows you to listen to whatever YouTube video you are playing whilst the display is off. Unfortunately, it won't allow you to play a video on YouTube in the background whilst you do other things like WhatsApp or something, but you have the floating window feature for that. And finally, there is Ella, Tecno's own virtual assistant. You can summon it by saying "Hey Ella," so naturally we all want to know how she compares to Google Assistant.
Hey Ella. Good evening.
Sorry, I'm not sure what you mean. You can ask me.
Hey Google. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hey Ella. What's the weather like today?
Mashonaland West is sunny on tomorrow. The highest forecast is 24 degrees Celsius and the low as 7 degrees Celsius.
Hey Google. What's the weather like?
It's 18 and clear. Tonight, the forecast is for a high of 16 and a low of 8 and partly cloudy.
What's 50 plus 33?
Sorry, I can't do it now.
What's 50 plus 33?
The answer is 83.
Set a timer for 1 hour. Set a timer for 1 hour.
Alright, 1 hour, starting now.
What is my calendar looking like tomorrow?
Sorry, beyond my reach, but I will keep learning to do more for you.
What's my calendar looking like tomorrow?
Sorry, I can't find anything on your calendar for then.
Who is Jar Praiser? Who is Jar Praiser?
According to Wikipedia, origin equals Harare, Zimbabwe, instruments equals vocals Mabira, label equals JP Studios.
Play me the latest TechZim podcast. Play me the latest TechZim podcast.
Here's the latest TechZim podcast on YouTube.
Granted, Ella still has a long way to go before it gets to the level of Google Assistant, but if you still prefer Google Assistant, you can set it as a default in the settings. I'm impressed to see Tecno taking a jab at having its own virtual assistants. It's quite a bold move. Smooth has been my experience since day one with the Phantom X. It has a very generous spec sheet and it only comes with one model, 8GB of RAM and 256 gigs of internal storage. It's also powered by a MediaTek Helio G90 CPU built in on a 12nm process with 8 cores, 6 power efficient cores and 2 high performance cores. It's got a 90Hz refresh rate panel which adds to the smooth user experience and the animations when closing apps, switching windows and even gaming. It's pleasant in day-to-day usage. The display is Full HD Plus and does the job well for general stuff like navigating the UI and going through social media. It's not as sharp as what you'd get from the likes of Samsung, Sony or Xiaomi, but most people won't notice. Something Tecno does not mention is that the display on the Phantom X supports HDR10, which is impressive at this price range. HDR means better picture quality, especially for gradients as well as richer colors. I am impressed with that. Both SIM slots get the same treatment in terms of connectivity with 4G available on both. And for those who are curious, yes, Zoll SIM cards work in this phone, but because of the always-on LTE demands of Zoll and Tel 1 SIM cards, it will significantly affect battery life. Speaking of battery life, the Phantom has a 4700 mAh battery, which is 300 mAh smaller than the ones in the Camon 17 and the Spark 7 that I did a comparison of. You can watch that video by clicking on the button at the top right hand of the screen. But the Phantom X can charge the battery at an impressive 33 watts with the bundled charger that unfortunately I did not have for this review. As much as the battery is a bit smaller than the rest of the Tecno lineup, the Phantom managed to beat the Camon 17 and the Spark 7 on our endurance, only experiencing 30% power drain after our 3-hour battery torture test of an hour each of gaming, video recording and video streaming. The Phantom X is a guaranteed 2-day battery phone as long as you're not using Zolotel online inside it. The loudspeaker also is noticeably better than other Tecno smartphones I've reviewed so far. It produces a richer and meatier sound and it gets pretty loud as well. In fact, I could not tell the difference compared to the loudspeaker on my Huawei P30 Pro apart from the higher maximum volume. It's a solid performer, more pleasing to use on a day-to-day basis but also with enough horsepower for the heavy lifting when you demand it. The Phantom X has an impressive camera setup, and to see how impressive it is, I decided to pit it against the best smartphone camera of 2019. Tecno's ultra sensing camera versus Huawei's super sensing system. Daylight shots are pretty close. In fact, it is pretty difficult to tell them apart. Both the Tecno and the Huawei were shooting in full auto with each phone's AI imaging wizardry turned on. They were pretty much even when it came to detail, with the Tecno's HDR brightening up shadows in images a little bit better than the Huawei. In fact, throughout most of the daylight shots, the Tecno is taking slightly brighter shots than the Huawei. The Tecno also takes photos that are more true to life when looking at the color balance. Huawei tries to saturate the colors a bit more to make colors in photos pop. And so the greens are greener, the blues are deeper, and the reds are more vivid on the Huawei than on the Tecno. But every phone does a good job of taking photos during the day nowadays. The real test of those cameras is at night. Here is where the Tecno takes Huawei's lunch. Night shots on the Tecno look brighter than on the Huawei. The stars are nice and crisp, and let's face it, you can see a lot more of them on the Tecno than on the Huawei. Color is also where I preferred the Tecno. It had a more accurate white balance and more accurate hues than the Huawei, which was throwing a weird green shade to every night shot. And what impressed me the most about the Phantom is how the image processing did a much better job than the Huawei of smoothing out shades and color gradients. The Huawei has distinct gradient steps that make the image a lot less clinical. It's a toss-up when it comes to daylight photos between these two phones, but for night shots, the Tecno definitely wins that one. The only dent to its clean record is that it took a lot more work to get the night mode to work on the Tecno versus on the Huawei. And whilst the Huawei was always spot on with focus, the Tecno was a bit hit or miss, and I had to do 4 retakes of some of the shots whilst I took none with the Huawei. The Phantom can shoot videos in 4K and the videos look phenomenal. The dynamic range is as good as in the photos, with impressive details in the shadows as well as in the highlights. It does a lot less focus hunting, which means it spends a lot less time twitching as it looks for focus. The camera UI also has some convenience where if you swipe from the bottom down in the viewfinder, it essentially drags the whole top row of toggles closer to the bottom so that it's easier to reach all the controls with one hand. There are only 2 frustrations I had with the camera. First is that you can only shoot 4K on the main sensor and not on the wide angle or the telephoto, which both top up at 1080p. The second and biggest issue I had is that it does not have a pro mode or a manual mode that allows me to be a lot more creative with the camera. And it hurt me a lot because Tecno fitted the Phantom with a monster camera, and I know I can get a lot more out of it than what Tecno is allowing me. The Tecno Phantom X will be retailing between $500 and $600 in Zimbabwe, which is quite a bit of change, but a lot cheaper than, let's say, an iPhone 11 or a Galaxy S21 Ultra. This is because some sacrifices were made to make it cheaper than the competition. There is no NFC, no wireless charging, no water resistance certification, and it doesn't come with one of the more powerful chipsets like the MediaTek's Dimensity chips. So when I ran Geekbench 5, the Tecno was considerably far behind the 2-year-old Huawei P30 Pro in literally every way. That said, the kind of corners Tecno is cutting are those that a majority of people in their target market will not use and most likely won't miss either, which makes them good compromises. The Tecno Phantom X is one very well-rounded phone. Price aside, it is complete. The design is breathtaking and matches the flagship aesthetic. The performance of the software is very fluid and intuitive, and it has some nuggets buried inside it, like the play in the background feature for videos. Same goes for demanding tasks like gaming, where the decent chip does a good job on a number of titles, but also the 90Hz display amplifies the immersive experience. The camera. It is a phenomenal performer both day and night in both photos and videos, and delivers quality all the time so long reliability stays true. And a solid 2-day battery as expected from Tecno devices as of late, so long you don't spend your time using Zolo Tel 1 SIMs in it. Throw in the price of $500 to $600 and you start to ask a couple of questions. Will it perform as good as other $500 smartphones from other brands like Xiaomi, Samsung or Huawei? The simple answer is yes, it will. You cannot get a better camera in any phone in this price range. But is the very best from Samsung, Huawei, Apple, Xiaomi up to $700 better than the Phantom X? That's a definite no. Whilst some compromises were definitely made on the Tecno, it still is pretty much 90% of the phone that all these other flagships are, but at half the price. It's also good enough to fully satisfy the needs of over 90% of the market Tecno is targeting, easily. What a time to be alive when cheap phones are becoming very good. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.